Today, I have a pleasure of having some of my wonderful colleagues here in this event. So Sunil Puri, who leads their research team in Asia Pacific. He's the person who authors all of our research papers. Sunil is so dedicated to advancing the practice of HR and leadership development, and more importantly, bringing some of the wisdom from east to west, right? So we produce a lot of research in Asia that is later shared with a broader audience and help to bridge the gap in understanding of global leadership and how leaders in Asia can contribute to global prosperity. So very pleased to have Chris Looi, a wonderful Director of Leadership Solutions. Please, can I just ask everybody to mute yourself? Thank you very much. Thank you. Chris has designed and delivered, facilitated a lot of programs that aim to develop leaders in Asia. So he will bring some really great insights and recommendations of what we can do to develop leaders in our region. And after that, I'm very pleased to welcome Kirby, who is a global learning partner with AstraZeneca based in the UK. And I will ask questions. I will be interviewing Becky, and I will ask her to share her practical experience of, in my opinion, a very successful and impactful approach in building a strong leadership capability in Asia and emerging markets overall. So if we go to the next page, basically we have a high-level agenda. We'll start with a presentation of research, a little bit of data, why we believe that certain areas are really important for leaders in Asia to develop. Then Chris will share some practical insights, and then the success story, the practical recommendations and learnings from Becky. And then in the end, we'll have Q&A and closing. Before we start, again, if I could ask everybody to mute yourself. If we go to next slide, please. Just a little bit, I'm sure all of you know CCL well. CCL is our mission, our passion is to advance the practice, the science and art of developing leaders. And we believe that having human-centric and enlightened leaders is not only important for success of individual organizations, it has a much broader impact on communities and society all around the world. And we do it at multiple locations through a wonderful network of associates all around the globe. And we serve a lot of multinational and local Asian organizations to support them with leadership development. So that's just a little bit about CCL. And now, shall we begin? Okay, so I would like to pass over to Sunil to present the background and the research on global Asian leaders. Sunil, over to you.
Thank you, Dinah, and thank you all for finding the time to attend this conversation and be a part of our journey to develop better global Asian executives. So as Dinah said, my name is Sunil. I head up research for the region. My job is to look around the block, identify leadership trends, and study those trends, and then share those trends back to the stakeholder community, which is what we are doing this afternoon. If you go to the next slide, yeah, so let's start by, what hopefully we all agree on, that Asia is the center of the world. Any organization that does not have a mature Asia strategy at this point has perhaps already missed the bus. And the reasons are plenty, as you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. Most developing countries in Asia are growing at north of 5 to 6%. The economies have kind of done better than most of the world, even during tough times. Asia has the biggest market in terms of the middle class. Of the next 1 billion people who will be joining the middle class, 8 out of 9 of those, or 8 out of 10 of those will be of the Asian origin. 2/3 of the global middle class in 2030. Out of that, about 60% of the leaders or people will be based in Asia. Also, Asia is the catchment area of talent because of the huge volume of youth in this part of the world. If you think about it, 20% of the population in Southeast Asia is between 15 and 19 or thereabout. About 60% of the world youth are based in Asia and Pacific. And also, we are not doing too badly on technology, on the internet. 1 in 2 people are Asians. If you look at the technology entrepreneurship, activity in various cities in Asia, there are many success stories, both big and small. So, well, you can't ignore Asia and you can't ignore Asian leaders, because organizations need Asian executives or Asian leaders to not inform the headquarters how to win in Asia. Just like any other region, Asia is different. Different set of culture, different set of business etiquettes that are at work. The way to do things is slightly different. Communications is slightly different, more contextual in this case. And therefore, to win in Asia, you need Asian executives to inform the headquarters. Also, you need Asian leaders to develop business across different countries in Asia, which can look very different despite geographic proximity. And as I said earlier, you also need, Asian talent to feed the global talent pipelines. Whether we like it or not, over the next couple of decades, a host of talent will be coming from this part of the world because we have the youth advantage, if you will. On the right-hand side are key skills we picked up that Asian leaders uniquely bring to the table. So when we asked, through the study, when we asked executives, hey, what are the skills you see most frequently Asian leaders bringing to the table? We heard the 6 that you see on the right-hand side. 1, superior execution, frame the project, give it to leaders, let's say in Singapore, they'll hit the ball out of the park 100% of the time. Superior work ethic, we like to work long hours, whether for good or for bad. We are okay working on Friday evenings, and I'm generalizing here, honestly. We are okay working over the weekends. In fact, I picked up a comment during this research when one leader highlighted that, hey, if I have too many Asians on my team, it plays a havoc with my work-life balance and the team's work-life balance. Also, generally bases the culture that Asian executives grow up in, the environment at home, the religious following sort of pushes us to be a little more humble, a little more empathetic, if you will. And again, I'm stereotyping here. And the last 2 capabilities are around the context we grow up in. We are comfortable with discomfort. Because we see so much happening on the socio-economic and political scene in different countries in Asia, we are fine with fine with uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and so on. And also, we are open to diversity as long as diversity is within our own countries. And I can build on that later. So if you think about it, the world needs Asia due to the market and the economic scene. The organizations need Asian executives. And there are critical skills we bring to the table, but there is a catch. If you go to the next slide, I'll share with you what we picked up on the data front when we looked at the top 200 organizations and looked at their executive teams. Only less than 10% of the executive teams comprised of Asian executives, either leaders of Asian ethnicity or nationality or both. Less than 10%. US-based MNCs had a higher number of around 8 or 9%. European companies were at 3 or 4% or thereabout. When we looked at the ethnicity of these executives and the executive teams of these large organizations, we realized that one community or one country or one nationality that dominated was the Indian community. So a lot of Indian CEOs, a lot of people of the Indian origin in the executive teams. We have a point of view on that, but I'll save that for a later day. I'll be happy to share why we think Indian executives do better than the other nationalities in representing the Asian community at the top in organizations. Now, we believe that Asian executives at some point in their careers hit a bamboo ceiling. We called it bamboo ceiling in our research. And when we have conversations with the global heads of HR, global CEOs, global CEOs, behind closed doors, they tell me, hey, Sunil, we talk a lot about developing talent from this part of the world, but where are the leaders who can hit the ball out of the park on a regional level and global level? And when I hear that question, I'm both excited by the opportunity, but also kind of skeptical, because there are two angles to that question. One, what do organizations think a global leader must look like? So if you have a fixed frame, then you wouldn't find a lot of talent in Asia. And what about the capabilities and experiences we must inculcate in our leaders to do well at a global and a regional level? So, we heard it enough number of times to invest some serious research energy to understand what's going on there. If you change the slide, Yufi, we conducted the biggest research on global Asian leadership in the region. We interviewed about 120 leaders, both leaders of Asian origin who were in regional and global roles, so expatriate Asians, and global leaders who had stayed in Asia for longer than three years to have a point of view on Asian talent and Asian leadership. 60% of these leaders were of Asian origin. They were across 68 organizations, a mix of industries, and as you can see, and about 6 out of 10 of these organizations were US, Europe, or Australia headquartered, mainly US and Europe. We kind of lean towards interviewing more business leaders. So a lot of presidents, CEOs, MDs, regional heads, and the balance 20% were heads of HR and heads of talent. So if you see the next slide, you'll see what we came up with, a complex looking root cause tree. That is what researchers do, right? So we curated what the key reasons that stall the growth of Asian executives to the top, the reasons that drive the bamboo ceiling, if you will. And there were 3 buckets of reasons. These 36 or 37 reasons that are pointed out in the middle of the slide, they fall in 3 buckets. One, there are country reasons. So if the country is not doing too well in terms of talent competitiveness, you wouldn't expect too many global ready leaders coming out of that country. For instance, if you want your next CEO to come from, let's say, Cambodia or Papua New Guinea, it will be hard. Not that there aren't smart people, there are plenty of smart people there, but the volume of talent that can hit the ground running in global roles is tiny as compared to some of the other nations. The second bucket is around company reasons, trust issues, biases that senior leadership teams may have, for or against Asian executives. Also, absence of clear agenda when expatriates come into the region for their 3-year or a 5-year run. Some talent management, tactics that organizations must use or are not using that are creating kind of bamboo ceiling in the region. Also, diversity of leadership at the top. We realized that organizations that had a non-native CEO had a much better or a healthy average of representation of diversity at their board level and at their executive team level. And finally, on the right-hand side, you'll see individual reasons, the skill and the will issues. There are some skills that are at premium in global roles, and those need to be developed to do well in those roles. And because of our cultural background, those skills are slightly harder to develop in an Asian executive. And also will issues. Global roles are tough roles. Regional roles are tough roles. They are hard for you, hard on your family because you need to work crazy hours. Take middle of the night conversations, and you need to travel. At least pre-COVID, you needed to travel. So your kids cannot go to the same school. The spouses cannot have a regular job, and so on and so forth. So do you have the will to take on a global role? Now, we have a diagnostic at CCL to identify which of these reasons may be at play in your organization. And perhaps one of my colleagues or I can talk about that later. So what do we do about it? On the next slide, you'll see leaders must think differently, have, let's say, a growth mindset, have a global mindset. They need to get the right experiences under their belt. And these experiences could be, out of home country experiences early on in their career, a headquarter experience at some point early on in the career, diversity of experiences, non-obvious career paths, and just so that the leader is comfortable with discomfort over the career run. And finally, 5 skills we identified through this research: courage to say no, courage to sort of raise your hand and say, hey, I'm ready for this role. Curiosity, curiosity to learn new skills, curiosity to meet new people, hunger to learn something new. Trust, which is being trusting of others and also being trustworthy yourself. Influencing skills, which is the ability to sort of influence decisions in a matrix organization. And strategic thinking long-term, thinking like a CEO, thinking global. So these are the 5 skills we picked up that are must have. And I wouldn't say these are the only skills you need, but these are skills that must be there in your portfolio, or these are skills you must get under your belt early on in your career to sort of do well in a regional and global role. Now, before I hand over to my colleague, Chris, let's get a lay of the land, quick poll around which of these skills you feel are the biggest gap in your peer group. If we can have the poll, please. Yeah. So as you take the poll, I must add that these are not skills that only Asian leaders must have. These are skills that you need irrespective of your ethnicity and nationality to do well in a global role. Now, some of the need for some of these skills is slightly more pronounced for Asian executives. They must be dialed up or dialed down depending on where you've grown up, the environment that you've experienced, your experiences in the past, your ethnicity, and so on. So hopefully we'll see the results soon. Okay, so as you see in front of you, it's about strategic thinking, thinking long-term, thinking global, understanding the long-term strategy, thinking like a CEO, wearing that CEO hat while taking decisions. The second one is around influencing. Again, global organizations, matrixed, you need to influence decisions, with people who may or may not report into you. And finally, courage to lean forward, courage to say, hey, I want to take that next opportunity, courage to say no, courage to have a tough conversation and walk out of the room as friends. So let me hand over to Chris now to build a little bit more on these skills and capabilities. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Sunil, and thank you all on the call for your time. We really appreciate it. I'm going to take a little bit of time now to share how we have taken an approach with clients to help develop leaders' capacity on some of these key traits. And certainly from the poll there, we noticed that strategic thinking was something that, from your perspective, was very important to develop. So let me share a couple ways we've been helping organizations and leaders grow greater capacity in this. As Diana and Sunil shared earlier, we extensively engage in research. And one of the areas that we've built practice around is the idea of strategic leadership. How can we help leaders think, act, and influence more strategically? And so one way that we've been working with leaders is to be able to leverage the behaviors that our research has shown effective strategic thinkers demonstrate. And so as simple as a profile of these behaviors, getting leaders to stop, pause, and reflect. Where am I showing these behaviors? Where could I dial up these behaviors even more in the context that I'm leading in? And they can have a conversation with their boss at times. Where do you think my strengths, where do you think of my areas of development are, according to these lists of effective behaviors that our research shows strategic thinkers engage in. In addition to that, we actually have a strategic leadership 360 that we administer with clients where they can get multiple perspectives from the region and also from global stakeholders. So they get multiple perspectives on what's going well and what they could be doing even better from a strategic leadership perspective, including that important skill of thinking strategically. Now, awareness is one thing, but helping them build muscle in that ability to think strategically is important. And so one way that we help clients do this is with creating a psychologically safe space where leaders can engage in the practice of thinking strategically, acting and influencing strategically, to practice these new behaviors, these new mindsets, to experiment in a safe space. One way we do that is with simulations. CCL has a simulation called Skyline Technologies. It's one of many that we have for strategic leadership. But this works very well here in the APAC region. And leaders come together, they come together for a semi-annual strategic planning meeting. And they've been tasked by the board to really wrestle with the future of the organization. And they're there to challenge the status quo, determine what are the strategic priorities, what are the strategic drivers that we need for the future? How can we make critical decisions to ensure the organization's future direction and future success? They are given email packets. There's over 50 issues in this complex simulation that they need to navigate and really think from a strategic perspective, not that execution perspective, but from that balcony perspective that the research shows that is important, about that future perspective. And so typically what happens is they're observed by CCL faculty, they're debriefed, they complete some questionnaires of how well were they able to elevate their thinking long-term, talking about the strategic drivers, the larger macro factors, getting out of the weeds. And so they're able to practice the feedback that they received and these new behaviors in a safe space, and then think through, how can I take this back and apply it directly to my workplace, my leadership challenge, my team, and my organization. So that's one way that we've worked with leaders around strategic thinking. Now, I saw also there on the poll results, the impact of influence and how we really need to dial that up and to be more effective. And as we work with clients all around APAC, they're saying the same thing as well. One way that we've worked with clients, and this is something that you could use, is an instrument called the Influence Style Indicator, the ISI, Influence Style Indicator. It's not actually owned by CCL, but we can certainly work with you in administering it for you. But it helps research-based framework around the preferred and dominant styles you seek to influence others. And the research shows that there are 5 typical styles. A style around asserting, ensuring that your voice is heard, your perspective is taken, challenging. A style around using data, facts or figures, rationalizing as you seek to influence others. One's around inspiring, connecting to people's values and purpose. The other 2 are negotiating, bridging. And what we do is we get the participants fill this out and they get the report back and they begin to realize, I have a preferred style, but there are a lot of other styles that are important that I'm not using. So how can I enhance my ability to bring these styles into the conversations, into the moments that I need to influence my stakeholders with? It's almost as if we're trying to give them an enlarged toolbox with all the tools that they need so that they can use them and become more adroit and effective in using them as they seek to influence at their workplace and with key stakeholders. Another tool that's important for them to think about and that we do in the classroom is actually helping them create a stakeholder map. So think about your key leadership challenge and all the key stakeholders that are involved that you need to influence and engage with. What might their preferred styles be? How might you develop an influence plan to help shift their thinking to align with what you need them to do? Another area that we help leaders develop their influence is, based on the research, is how effective is your leadership network? We found that a lot of leaders here in the APAC region at times have a very operational leader network. It could be very tied into their day-to-day activities, helping them reframe and rethink. How can I develop a more strategic, an open, a diverse and broad network with people inside, outside of the organization, in region, out of region? And how can I build greater connections and deepen the relationship with them so that I can influence more effectively across the globe and across the organization and even outside of the organization? Another area around influence is we're working with a global software organization, and we were interviewing some of their senior leaders back in Europe. And they said, we come to Asia and sometimes we leave without having any memorable connection with these leaders here. And we just wish they would leave more of an indelible impression on us. And we just wish they would connect more and influence us in that way. And what we worked out was, how can we really speak and connect more with leaders when they come from headquarters? And we worked out it was around storytelling, business narrative, leadership narrative. How can we tell compelling stories that capture the attention, the heart and minds of these senior executives so that we grow our visibility in the network and in the system? And so we incorporate that into some of the solutions to great effect and great impact. Another area that we saw that was important was the idea of courage. And we won't get through all of these, but certainly the top ones that you've mentioned. Now, I remember I started off my career at Greensboro, North Carolina, at our headquarters at CCL. And the first year I was there, I got some feedback. Chris, we really find you're very polite and you're very kind. What we'd love for you is to be a little bit more assertive, a little bit more vocal. Can you challenge us a little bit more? Can you confront us a little bit more? And I worked out that I actually needed to dial up my courage in North America compared with where I came here in the Asia Pacific. And what we realized for me, and what's really important for us as we do this work, is that it's not just always about skills and tools. Courage is also about mindset. How might we explore what are the mindsets that are in our mind that are stopping us from being more courageous? And part of what we do in our organization is to actually take leaders through a process of exploring what are the mental models, what are the mindsets that get in the way of us dialing up, being more assertive, being more vocal, particularly at the global level. At the regional level, we may be speaking, we may be asserting, but how might we do that more impactfully at the global level? So working with leaders through a process, we call it the immunity to change process or the growth gap process. We've got multiple processes that we take leaders through, but it's about unearthing what are the mindsets that are inhibiting us from engaging in being more courageous or the leadership goals that we're trying to achieve. Once we've helped leaders think through their mindset, challenge these existing assumptions, we then can share with them the research around skills and tools. So for instance, Sunil talks about their being able to manage conflict more effectively. So certainly we would share with the leaders some of our research around how to have constructive conflict conversations. One of the ways that we do that with leaders is we ask them to think about someone back in your workplace who you need to have a difficult conversation with. All right, do some pre-work, some reflection. You come into the actual class and in small groups, you actually role play in a psychologically safe space, these difficult conversations with the CCL coach. And the coach and the observers are there to give you feedback, to help you practice in a safe space, having these conversations with us before you actually go back into the real workplace and actually have these difficult conversations. In addition to that, CCL has a whole host of models and frameworks and tools around how to give feedback, for instance. So we know that for courage, giving candid feedback is very important. So we often share with leaders our model on how to give candid, open feedback, which is called situation, behavior, and impact, or what we call the SBI model. So there's some of the ways that we've been helping leaders develop these important skills. And I'd like to invite Diana now and Becky to talk about their experience, how we partnered with AstraZeneca on their global Asian leader approach.
Thank you so much, Chris and Sunil. I'd like to point out that when Sunil was sharing the findings of the research, there are two equally important aspects of building the right system, so to speak, that will allow us to successfully develop leaders in Asia and elsewhere. It's the system itself, the organization, and how it creates an environment, an ecosystem that is designed to provide exposure, opportunity, and continuous development to leaders in Asia. On the other side, it's leaders themselves, their awareness and understanding of these are some of the areas that I need to pay additional attention to. I need to maybe make more effort to develop. And then working with the manager, with the HR, with the wider organization on developing those capabilities. In reality, a lot of the organizations that we speak to, they say, we've made a lot of efforts. We provide coaching, we have programs, we have done a lot to develop leaders, but we still are not seeing significant or sufficient strengths in the leadership pool in Asia. Leaders from Asia are still perceived as strong in execution, not necessarily strong enough already to take on larger regional or global roles. So what is the reason behind that? And the reason is really creating the ecosystem that incorporates both sides of the problem. And I'm so pleased to have Becky here today because I believe that AstraZeneca has been particularly successful in bringing these two areas together. And Becky, you mentioned a phrase to me that really stuck stuck in my mind. When you talked about the program that you've developed for Asian leaders, you mentioned that this program is an ecosystem within a larger ecosystem, right? And I just found that to be such an accurate and concise description of what we are trying to achieve. So I would like to start the conversation, Becky, with a larger ecosystem. So I think it would be really helpful if you can share with our participants the big picture. What was the business issue, the talent strategy, and overall approach that AstraZeneca took to developing leaders in Asia and overall in emerging markets? And I think you're in a very unique position because you are in a global role and you have a high big picture and hands-on experience and overview of what AstraZeneca is doing in many different parts of the world. So where did you see the key challenges and objectives when developing leaders in Asia?
Thank you, Diana. So I guess to start, I'm going to steal with pride a metaphor that someone else said to me, the HR VP for our region, which is if you wanted to turn a desert into a rainforest, you wouldn't just plant one shrub and expect that to become your rainforest. You would plant all different types of shrubbery, flora, you'd nurture them, you'd bring in different watering strategies and bring in different expertise to help that happen. And that's really our approach to how we think about developing our pipeline of leaders. You can't expect there to be one silver bullet, just one program or developing one or two skill sets and expect to see the impact that we're really wanting. We need to take a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach in order to get there. So that's really the overarching principle of the work that we do. So there's a number of different programs and initiatives that happen specifically in how we think about developing our pipeline of leaders. So different mentoring schemes, programs like the one I lead, thinking more specifically about developing key skill sets. And I think again, another overarching principle is that it is systemic. We cannot in HR or learning and development deliver these initiatives in isolation. We need to partner with the business. We need to partner with different teams so that everybody is aware of what we're trying to achieve, the challenges, the opportunities, and really critically their role within that in order to drive the vision or the aspiration that we want. It can't be a kind of learning and development taking place in a vacuum away from the day job. We all need to play a part in this. So I guess taking that broader principle, that's exactly what we've applied and how we've designed and delivered the program that I work on. As you say, an ecosystem within an ecosystem, ensuring that we're not just focusing on developing key skills, but as Sunil was describing earlier, how can we provide some really great experiences for these individuals to push them outside their comfort zone, to develop their networks and ensure that we've got two-way learning going on. I think that's really really critical. Again, to quote Sunil, we're not trying here to develop a framework of kind of, this is what a global leader looks like, this is the persona, you need to fit this mold or you're not going to get there. Actually, there needs to be two-way learning in the organization. We need to upskill and educate leaders who are already in global roles, who are perhaps in the US, UK, Europe, wherever, about some of this research, about some of the challenges that we're facing, so that they can help develop the talent and leverage the talent that we've got in these regions. And equally, we need to invest in the talent already there and thinking about how they can navigate this system as best they can as well. So hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of our principles.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, I think you're so right. And HR can design and deliver a fantastic intervention, fantastic development program. But if the business leaders, the direct managers, the managers of managers are not genuinely committed to developing those leaders, the impact probably wouldn't as significant as the organization needs it to be. So I love that. Ecosystem within ecosystem. So now let's focus on the smaller ecosystem. The program itself, which I think itself was a really holistic ecosystem, right? So many organizations have good programs in place, but a lot of organizations are not seeing the impact that they want, or the impact takes too long to be seen. So what were the key success factors in the approach to developing, designing the program that you lead?
Sure, I'd probably say there's three parts to this. And the first is how we design and deliver this. And it truly has been a collaboration. So I sit in our Global Talent Development Centre of Excellence. I work on leadership development programs that are intended for global audiences, enterprise-wide. So I bring that kind of global perspective, if you like. What are some of the global capabilities that are really important to AstraZeneca? What are we trying to dial up over the next 5 years, let's say? What's really important to us? What are we seeing is critical for success in some of our global roles? That's the perspective I'm bringing. I then partner very closely with our regional HR team. So our Asia area HR director and talent lead, who bring a slightly different perspective. So they obviously have a very deep understanding of the Asia region, what's going on in the region. So we can ensure that we're tailoring these experiences, that it's actually meeting leaders where they are, that we are understanding the context that these leaders are in, and we're kind of cognizant of that reality. We're not designing and delivering something that just isn't quite hitting the mark. And they then also have fantastic networks within the region, which, as I've described, is really important, that this is systemic and it's kind of intertwined to other work that we're doing. So they ensure that all of our stakeholders in the region are engaged, they know what we're doing. We've got a fantastic sponsor in Asia, our area vice president, who is really genuinely interested in the work that we're doing. She takes a very active role, and that's because of that partnership with the regional HR teams. And they also have a network they can tap into for us to invite guest speakers into our sessions to sponsor projects. So I think having that kind of really kind of on the ground, understanding what's going on, how can we make this really applied, really meaningful for people, that collaboration and collaboration with the business has been really, really important. It's not just something that we've delivered from our global COE, a kind of one-size-fits-all approach. It's been very collaborative and very tailored. So that's probably the first part that I think has been critical for the success. The second part is definitely the research. So the research that we've just heard about from Sunil and Chris. And that's been the foundation of the design of what we've been doing. And again, I think it's that tailored nature that is so important. The fact that we're not just saying, these are our global capabilities, this is what success looks like for AstraZeneca broadly around the entire world, here's the vision, go reach it. We're actually tailoring it and meeting people where they are and trying to better understand the context and thinking about, well, what might this mean for an individual in Asia or LATAM? How might that show up differently? Where are they starting from? It's a different starting place. And I think that tailored nature, again, has been really, really important. And the robustness of the research has given us some credibility in order to talk about that and to talk about the kind of foundation for the design of our program. And then the last piece, I would say, the ecosystem piece, it's the blended design. It's the fact that we're including all different types of experience. So there's 5 main elements to the program that I work on. It's delivered over 9 or 10 months. It's quite high touch, high investment. It's a lot of time commitment for these individuals who are participating. And just to walk you through kind of high level what they are, we start off with an assessment. So as Chris was saying, just to build a little bit of self-awareness, to give people a little bit of data about themselves as they enter into this experience, so they can start to make sense of some of the learning in a slightly more mature way and apply it in a way that's meaningful to them. So that's the first part. We then have workshops that are designed and delivered by yourselves. So the wonderful Chris does that for us in Asia. And these are very targeted. So each module we deliver is one of the traits or the skills that we've just heard about. So a module on strategic thinking, influence, courage, trust. And this is very targeted because we know these are skills that we want to amplify to help accelerate people's development into global roles. So we want to give people the tools, techniques in order to do that. So these are very, very focused on those skills that we've heard about. The next piece is we work with a global business school. And I think a common challenge kind of in Asia and outside of Asia is when you're moving from perhaps being an individual contributor or someone who is more kind of executor of work into a bigger role that's more strategic. You need a different tool set. You need different skills to start to think about, how do I now actually think much longer term? How do I scan the external context, the internal context, and from that design a strategy and bring people on board with that. So we want to help people with that. So we work with the business school who deliver more of your kind of MBA style tools and techniques to help people think and act more strategically and then actually operationalize a strategy. The next piece are our projects. So we have senior leaders from within the region sponsor a project. So this is a real AstraZeneca challenge or opportunity. And we intentionally match people to a project that is completely outside of their area of expertise or experience, because we want to give people that stretch assignment, that feeling of discomfort and that feeling of, where do I even start with this? And then it builds confidence as they work their way through and start to figure out, actually, this is something that I can do. And it helps develop enterprise thinking as well, starting to learn about what's going on in different parts of the organization. And we've had people in HR roles who are working on a renal project. We've had people in marketing roles working on the digital strategy. So completely outside of individuals' comfort zones. And as we heard from Sunil, giving people those diverse experiences and getting people more comfortable with discomfort is something that's really important. It's not just about developing those critical skills. And it's an opportunity to build your network. So you'll be working with your project sponsor very, very closely. It's an opportunity to build that relationship. And it's an opportunity on the other side for that two-way learning for the project sponsor to meet individuals that perhaps they wouldn't have before, to offer some of their mentorship, share some of their wisdom and their experience. So that's something that we're seeing is working really nicely. And then the last piece, and this is a piece that I get very excited about, we've developed an internal coaching strategy. So coaching and feed forward is something that's very important to us globally. It's a culture that we are aspiring to embed. We're on that journey. So what we've done is we've actually, from another leadership program for more senior leaders who are already in global roles, we asked the volunteers for them to act as coaches and had a fantastic response. And so each participant on the program in Asia is matched with a senior leader who offers coaching, one-to-one coaching throughout the entire 9-10 month experience. And what we're seeing that provides is, it's first off a really psychologically safe environment. You're one-to-one with someone who sits outside your business area, sits outside where you're based. And they provide that space for you to think through. You're learning from the CCL workshops and what those skills mean to you, the things that you've picked up from the business school, the project that you're working on. They help you take all of that and apply it to the context, to your context and some of the challenges perhaps that you're facing. And these leaders, the more senior leaders, have quite often been through some of the experiences and challenges that the participants are facing. So relocating, moving your family, stepping up into a role where you suddenly need to think more strategically and you need to delegate and you need to influence. How do you approach some of those things? So it is a relationship that kind of flips between both coaching and mentoring. And we're seeing that is working really nicely. It's a huge takeaway for our participants. And what I'm really excited about is it's really starting that two-way learning that I was describing. It's giving these coaches that are in different parts of the world, different parts of the organization, insight into this research, insights, and a role to play in what we're trying to do in developing our pipeline of Asian leaders. So it's a starter. And you know, Diana, I've got plans to share this research more broadly within the organization and continue that two-way learning piece. But it's really starting to do that. So it's something that I feel quite excited about. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the different elements of the program.
Thank you so much, Becky. And I feel that what you are describing is the manifestation of ecosystem and partnership thinking. You were able to build the ecosystem and partnership between global and regional HR, business leaders and HR, so internal partnerships, combined with external partnerships, curating experience, CCL workshops, the business school component, and bringing it all together. So certainly I would suggest to have a very strong project management resource to anybody who plans to do a program like that. I have one more question that I want to ask Becky, but before I do that, just wanted to encourage everyone to type your questions in because that's a great opportunity for you to ask something that is very relevant to you. So my last question, Becky, is really on the impact. So how do you measure impact of this very high touch program? And on a short term, what have you observed? The behaviors of those participants, the feedback from the business leaders. So one is more data-driven measurement. Second is like, what do you see and feel?
Sure. So first off, measuring the impact, there's a number of ways. Probably our core KPI really is our talent data. So are we seeing movement in our succession readiness, our promotions, our relocations, lateral moves, that kind of thing. Obviously, it is early days for that talent data. We only concluded our first cohort March of this year, but we are seeing it move in the right direction, which is fantastic to see already. The next piece is the impact of these projects, the sponsored projects that I mentioned. So what value are we seeing for the organisation there? And then lastly, it's more of a kind of a standard approach. So we survey the line managers of the individuals going through the programme, the participants themselves and the coaches. And I guess so far, specifically from the line manager perspective, what I'm hearing in Asia is probably three biggest themes that they've seen changes in how their team members are showing up. The first one is more strategic thinking, so taking a much longer term view when they're thinking about how they approach their work, doing that sort of kind of forward looking view, which is fantastic. The next piece was courage. So we've heard oh, my team member, all of a sudden they're putting their hand up for pieces of work, they're pushing themselves out their comfort zone, they're challenging more, contributing more, which we love to hear. And the last piece is having more curiosity, so thinking differently about how they problem solve and how they think about different approaches, not just doing what's been done before, but actually thinking outside of the box and taking time to pause and think, well, actually, how could we think differently about that? So that's from the line manager side. From the participants themselves, I'd say one of the biggest takeaways, kind of more broadly, because of the sort of systemic approach that we've taken, it's the network that they've built, especially during these times where most of us are working from home, or at least we're not traveling, even if we are in the office. It's really limiting those connections that we make with people outside of our kind of intact team. So building that network has been fantastic. It's given them different opportunities, whether that's formal roles, working on projects, just a coffee and a chat with someone who thinks differently and can share a really interesting idea. And I think critically, when those opportunities arise, we've started to give people the skill sets and the tools needed to really leverage those opportunities and maximize the value out of them. So that's what we're seeing so far. Anecdotally, I'm hearing it's a very positive experience for people. It is a lot of time, it is an investment, but it seems to be paying off from what we're hearing and seeing so far.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure it's really, really helpful insight. And we already have one question for you, Becky, from Trina. So Trina is asking if you're able to share how many people in the cohort, and also what support or training was provided to the coaches/mentors.
Sure. So cohort size, it's between 25 and 30. I think given the nature of some of the activities that are designed by by yourselves and some of the projects, I think having a smaller group works nicely. It creates that psychological safety. It creates really strong relationships within the cohort. And given we've got so many different people involved, we need sponsors, we need coaches, to scale that would be quite difficult. So keeping it smaller, I think, has worked well. And then the next question on the coaches side, so we partner with yourselves. So you've been delivering better conversations every day, and I think we've trialed it in different ways. There's the kind of what was 2 days or a full day face-to-face, obviously delivered virtually, and then we've done a shorter workshop. So it just helps to develop some skills on coaching, so listening, asking powerful questions, that kind of thing. So we've worked in partnership with yourselves to do that, and then, as I say, developing this culture of continuous coaching is something that is a much broader strategic priority for AZ. So there's other pockets of work going on within the organisation more generally, so it's more of us kind of reinforcing that and providing people with a recap, rather than having to start from scratch or do it on our own.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would also add that certainly it's important to provide some form of training to the internal coaches. We don't expect them to be professional coaches, but we want them to be able to have a coaching conversation. So the better conversation every day program that we can deliver within a day, 4 hours, 2 hours, depending on the need, really focuses on some of the core foundational coaching skills, and the participants will benefit beyond the program. So thank you so much, Becky. Do we have any other questions? Please do type in. And while we are waiting for more questions to come in, I actually have a question for Sunil from a research perspective and Becky from a delivery perspective. I cannot not ask a question about the impact of COVID pandemic, right? So Sunil, I know you're continuing research on global Asian leader. What are you hearing? Are there new needs, new gaps, new development areas, or maybe more urgency, or anything that you are seeing new emerging because of the pandemic? And the question then for Becky, from another side of it, what were some of the additional challenges maybe of implementing and delivering a program like that during the pandemic fully virtually, right? So same question from two different sides. So Sunil, maybe if we could start with you.
Sure. So a quick top of the head kind of reflection around what I've been hearing in my conversations with heads of HR, CEOs, even board directors over the last couple of weeks, when we are asking them, hey, what is the impact of COVID on particularly leadership in Asia? And I'm wearing the lens of global leadership in Asia. So there are two lines of responses we picked up. One is that there is a little more openness to people working remotely, and therefore some more roles may be relocated to this part of the world. That's one line of responses that I've picked up. So there may be more opportunities because now the organization does not require you, at least in theory, to step out of your home country. So to take on some global roles, not a whole lot, but some global roles you can do from your host country, and therefore the talent pool that is available for doing these roles gets bigger. The opportunities gets bigger. On the other side, I'm also hearing some anxiety in large organizations that because now there is no restriction on physically being in another country for doing global roles, some of the roles may flow out of Asia already. So think about it. And when I speak with the leaders in Singapore government, they are kind of sort of concerned a little bit because Singapore is the hub of talent, if you will. And now if some roles flow out of Singapore to, let's say, KL or Taiwan or Hong Kong and so on, it doesn't do too well to the region. In terms of capabilities, it is your regular capabilities to do well in the virtual world. So getting that growth mindset, virtuality mindset, have a boundary spanning mindset, if you will, learning agility, building up your online persona. Those are some of the things that I've picked up organizations are working on.
Thank you, Sunil. Becky, maybe very quickly, we just have a few minutes left. What were the challenges in implementing this fully virtually?
Probably time. So you can't lock people in a conference center and take away their emails. That you're relying on their own self-discipline to not jump off and join other meetings and that kind of thing. So I think that the time aspect is a challenge. And then well-being. I think we're all in front of our laptops for many hours a day. Often people aren't taking breaks or even walking to a meeting room or getting water. I think that's something, again, that we've obviously spoken to yourselves about, how we can weave in some lessons around how you look after yourself and put your own oxygen mask on first, if you like, to deal with these challenges.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. If we could bring the slides back, please. So I'd like to thank our speakers and especially Becky. Great insights. For those in the audience who are really thinking of how can I deliver this? How can I really implement some of the tools? And by the way, one of the questions was asked about the assessment. So during the program, the assessment that were used was assessment that either owned by CCL or we frequently use, but I believe AstraZeneca used another assessment before program started, which was on leadership potential, right, Becky? Yeah. So for those who really want to touch and feel, how does it really flow and how do participants experience this? We will be doing a experiential workshop. So Chris has very kindly agreed to do a 1.5 hour taster of sorts, right? Where he will take the audience through some of the experiential activities that we would most frequently use to develop global Asian leaders. So please get in touch with us if you like to experience that. And at the same time, we are actually, because there's so much demand and so much interest in this topic, we are doing an open enrollment program in January. That it starts in January, which basically is designed based on the research, will be delivered virtually, and targets high potential leaders in Asia who either have been identified for those global or regional roles or have that aspiration. So please do let us know if you'd like to know more. And to close the session today, we would really welcome your feedback. So if we can go to the next page, if you can just scan this barcode and tell us what you thought, if you have any other questions, what other content you'd like to, we would highly, highly appreciate that. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you found this 1 hour engaging and insightful and helpful. And any questions, any additional information you have, please do reach out to us. So thanks so much, Becky, Sunil, and Chris, and everybody who participated today, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.